Well, in less than 2 hours, former Trump White House advisor Steve Bannon is expected to turn himself in to New York prosecutors. He's set to face new state charges of criminal wrongdoing. So chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa is in Washington with the very latest on all of this. Robert, good morning.
Good morning. The nature of the charges remains unclear. We are waiting for the indictment to be unsealed. Bannon, who worked with Trump to try to overturn the 2020 election, has been a force on the far right for a decade and has been working to elect like-minded Republicans this year.
Longtime Trump ally Steve Bannon is now likely facing state charges, with a criminal indictment expected in New York. Such charges may revive a past controversy. Bannon once faced federal fraud charges related to We Build the Wall Incorporated, a fundraising operation that sought to build private sections of the wall along the U.S.-Mexico border and raise $25 million. The Justice Department alleged that Bannon personally received more than $1 million from We Build the Wall. But early last year, Trump pardoned Bannon before he could be brought to trial on the federal charges.
Steve Bannon could be in great legal jeopardy in terms of prison time.
CBS News legal analyst Ricky Kleeman.
Well, the state courts and the federal courts are separate entities. We look at something called double jeopardy as to whether someone could be tried twice for the same crime. Well, here, Steve Bannon was never tried. He was pardoned by former President Trump. So he was never put in jeopardy. So the state had every right to go forward.
In a statement, Bannon wrote, "This is nothing more than a partisan political weaponization of the criminal justice system."
Trump won, Biden's illegitimate.
This comes just weeks after the former Trump advisor was convicted of contempt of Congress for refusing to cooperate with the January 6th committee investigating the attack on the Capitol. A judge recently denied Bannon his request for a new trial.
Meanwhile, the legal standoff continues in the probe of former President Trump's handling of sensitive documents. Tomorrow is the deadline for the Justice Department and Trump's lawyers to present a list of candidates for the role of special master. That outside attorney would independently review the documents that are in the government's possession. And it was 1 month ago today that the FBI searched Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, I would think that finding that person is going to be a tall order. Not only do they have to sort of know what to do in terms of the job, but they have to have the security clearance that allows them to go through all these highly sensitive documents. But we will put that to the side and talk about that another time. I want to talk about Steve Bannon. Do we know anything about his decision to surrender today? I mean, he's got a podcast. He's not a guy known for sort of keeping quiet. So what do we know?
He was expected to face a trial 2 years ago about this We Build the Wall Incorporated, an enterprise by him and others, associates on the far right, that were trying to privately fund a border wall. The government believed that Bannon and others allegedly operated in some sort of fraud by collecting funds from donors and not fully articulating how they were spending that money to the people they were soliciting funds from. And this led to the Justice Department to pursue Bannon in 2020. But then came the pardon from then-President Trump in early 2021, just before Trump left the White House. And it put this entire legal episode on the shelf until now, where it is reemerging in New York as a different case, not a federal case, but one on the state level.
Right, and you point out that it's sealed, so we're sort of making a lot of assumptions, but educated assumptions, that we're talking about the very same thing. So that being said, when it came to the federal case, there were other sort of co-defendants, if you will. They're not co-defendants, but other people who were charged in connection with this scheme. Do we know what has happened with the others?
Some of them have decided to plead guilty based on what I've read about this and followed in our reporting. And what we see is, in Bannon's case, someone who has been consistently defiant on this front, among other legal challenges. And we will watch closely today to see how he responds.
Well, speaking of other legal challenges, as you point out in your story, Bannon was convicted in July on contempt of Congress charges after refusing to comply with a subpoena from the House committee investigating the January 6th attack. His sentencing is scheduled for next month. Can we talk about the significance of this trial and whether or not we have any sort of inkling as to what his sentence could look like?
Bannon's trial is significant because it was a trial where he was prosecuted for obstructing Congress, for not cooperating with the January 6th committee. And the committee pursued him for months with a subpoena to try to get him to talk about his conversations with President Trump during late 2020, early 2021. He was seen by the committee as a key witness. They wanted to hear from Bannon. What was he saying to Trump on the eve of the insurrection, January 5th? As the committee has detailed and CBS News has reported, phone logs showed Trump and Bannon were speaking on January 5th, 2021. What did they say in those phone calls? And on January 6th, they spoke as well in the evening. And so Bannon was someone who the committee really wanted to hear from, but Bannon refused to cooperate with the subpoena. And when he did, the Justice Department did something that was highly unusual. They pursued an indictment against someone for obstruction of Congress. It doesn't often happen. Usually these kind of requests are settled by Congress with a witness. The Justice Department doesn't always get involved, but they did. And by getting involved, the Justice Department sent a message about the seriousness of the committee and why they believe people should cooperate.
So, Steve Bannon is, of course, a longtime ally, former advisor of former President Trump. In his most recent statement, or one of his recent statements, he talked about this investigation sort of and compared himself to Donald Trump, saying, oh, they're coming after all of us, not just me and Trump. Could his legal issues impact the former president's sort of base voters in the midterm elections? I know the former president is not running in the midterms, but he certainly has quite a bit of influence.
Bannon has this perch on the far right with his media platform, his war room, where he brings all these candidates and like-minded Republicans together, and they talk about, in particular, election denialism. And they continue to falsely claim that President Biden did not win the 2020 election. And this has become a hot spot politically on the right wing, where Bannon is seen as someone who carries that banner for election denialism, and he is a big supporter still of former President Trump, encouraging of the idea of Trump running in 2024. How this affects the midterms, it remains to be seen, but we do know that for Republicans, there is now a legal cloud, at least over some aspects of the midterm elections. Yes, the economy, yes, abortion rights, and so many other issues are playing into this campaign season. But you have the former president facing legal scrutiny on the federal level, on the state level, Georgia, January 6th committee, grand juries in Washington. Now you have his associate, among others, Peter Navarro, John Eastman, and Steve Bannon facing legal challenges, to say the least. And that creates, for voters, there's an atmosphere of legal problems among some of these top Republicans, especially in the Trump wing. Whether that changes any votes, hard to say, but it's a reality politically and legally.
Yeah, definitely. It could be a cloud over some of these candidates, or, the way they're characterizing it is as, a partisan attack. And sometimes that gets people out to vote as well. Robert, thank you very much.
Thank you.